Hey everybody, welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, and today I welcome my good friend Brent DeNure from Vintage Fire Truck Equipment. Brent's president for an awesome company called Vintage Fire Truck Equipment based in America. Brent and his teams are dedicated to the history and preservation of firefighting apparatus. It's a magazine for the enthusiast made by the enthusiasts. Now, these guys serve thousands of subscribers in over 10 countries. So if you're the kind of person who've experienced that rush of being on the fire truck with those vivid lights and piercing sirens rushing to an emergency, you're the sort of person that loves those flowing lines, the sparkling chrome, and the artistic beauty of the rigs and the fire engines you see all over the world. We also talk a lot about the collectors. So collectors of these models and equipment are a massive sector of society that really show an enormous amount of passion and ignite that enthusiasm for vintage fire trucks and equipment all over the world. Vintage Fire Truck creates 6 issues every single year, full of an awesome amount of photos, information. They talk about some of the big game changers that you see. Talk about fire hoses, the equipment, the people, and the odd retro ad. There's also nothing better than hearing the stories of the vintage apparatus. You know, how did the things come about? How did the equipment get made? What were the different innovations that happened over the years? What is the history from those who have spent time actually doing it? There's also plenty of tips, tricks, and techniques for everything from buying your first rig to restoring the equipment and organizing your very own muster. A big thanks once again to our long-term sponsor, William Wood Watches. William Wood Watches is a UK-based watch manufacturer where upcycling is taken to a whole new level. William Wood are all about history on your wrist and feeling the beat of the fire service with you every step of the way. William Wood Watches has the vision to be the leading sustainable watch brand that upcycles rescue service materials for a new life, once forgotten, now reborn. So get over, have a look, get yourself registered, and check out some of the incredible stuff at williamwoodwatches.com. I really enjoyed my chat with Brent today. He's such an interesting guy. I know you're going to enjoy this one. The audio in it was a little bit scratchy. We're coming all the way from America, remember, but the content is absolutely awesome. We touch base on several different innovations as the fire service and the equipment changed over the years. Thank you for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. Thank you for listening in. I know you're going to love this one, so buckle up for safety, and I will see you on the other side.
Hey, Pete.
Brent, how's it going, my man?
Doing really well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound fantastic.
Oh, you look fantastic.
Always a charmer. I love your style. You look so comfy. I'm all stood up. I'm all official. I love. What's that behind you on the wall? What's on the wall?
Oh, geez. I'm falling apart here. The big poster is from Firefest 2013 or 14.
Wow.
With a few of our special guests on it, and just some pictures of some rigs that were down at the show. Yeah, this is where I kind of do a lot of the writing and kind of get creative for the magazine one.
You have to have that special spot. This is the hub, if you will. So we've got my space, then I've got my wife sits down there. My daughter has got her office on the left. I say office, she's 8 years old. She does a lot of messing about. And we have obviously the big whiteboard. You've got to have the whiteboard for all the creativity. That's what tends to happen in here. We get in here, throw in stuff on the whiteboard. I'm a big visual thinker. I've got to have it up there in front of me.
Yeah, no, me too, man. Me too. It's the only way to be.
So thank you so much for spending some time with me today, my man. For anybody that's unfamiliar, I'll just wind it up. Brent, you are the president of Vintage Media and Vintage Fire Truck Equipment, which is a hell of a mouthful. Yeah. I feel incredibly lucky. I'm holding in front of me now. I've actually fallen in love with the 1912 centrifugal. I know we'll just jump ahead of ourselves. You sent over some wonderful, really glossy documentation and sort of the magazines around the vintage fire truck stuff. And my daughter has not put them down. She tends to run to Granny and Granddad or anybody that she can to show them their favourites. I feel quite bad now because every time we go to the fire station, all the stuff that I use now is pretty rubbish. Lily, she's like, Daddy, why is your fire engine not look as nice as that one? And I says, well, you know, baby, it's what Daddy's got to play with at the minute. I haven't got any of the same ones that Brent's got.
There you go. Yeah, no, we're very fortunate. The magazine is widely celebrated by those in the hobby and those in fire service. We pride ourselves on offering a pretty premium product with the paper and the gloss and a high quality finish. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun and the program's really growing nicely for us.
So for people that are unfamiliar with it, first and foremost, when did this passion of yours sort of get started with it? And I know we're going to go into the detail of just a couple of the favorite pieces that we have, but where did your passion with the fire service in general, or certainly pumps, come from?
Well, it was kind of born into me. I grew up into it. My dad bought his first fire truck the year I was born.
Really?
And the year after, but just when I was I wasn't even walking. There was a rig in his garage. My father, he's the one. He's the one that introduced me to it. He had a huge affinity for going to parades and special events and wanted to buy a fire truck just because he saw how much fun we're having with them. And that kind of just grew into this kind of crazy state we're at now, where we've got a few rigs in our collection and a magazine and organizing events.
What drove him to get his first one? Because that is, talking about it and doing it are two very different things. Because it's not like buying a new TV or saying you're quite interested in golf and getting a set of golf clubs. This is a hell of a commitment.
That kind of a guy who's a very passionate man, and he always has been. And he's very community-minded, very community-oriented. And back in 1979, the year I was born, he was on a committee for a plowing match, a big community event. And part of his responsibility with his involvement with the plowing match was to go to parades and have a float and promote the event. And when the event came and went, he all of a sudden had no reason to go to the parades, but he really liked going to the circuit. And he absolutely he loves seeing all the smiles on our faces with all the people. His kind of mantra was he loves the parade because everybody can afford the price of admission. And basically, his fire truck was his ticket back into the parade circuit. And he really kind of fostered a desire to be part of this community. They're great people. And what started out as one truck, maybe grew to two or three, and he had a bus company. So he was fortunate in the sense that
he wasn't intimidated in the same way. Because I've had different business ventures and stuff like that, but it's never been something big like that. Because I suppose, like you say, if he already familiar with that sector and he had a comfort with large vehicles, it wouldn't have been as intimidating for him. Because I'm sure there's so many firefighters listening who are like, "Oh man, I'd love my own truck, and I'd do this with it, and I'd do that with it, and I'd look after it." And I'm like, "Where are you going to put it?" You must have had an understanding family or an understanding mother who didn't completely lose her mind when the first fire engine just rocked up.
Very patient. He's been patient with him, and he's patient with me too. So, but no, you're spot on. I mean, he was fortunate in the sense that his career, his work commitment, afforded him the ability to get these big pieces of equipment and roll them in. And when it comes to the fire truck hobby, Pete, in a lot of cases, it's very inexpensive to get in. It can be expensive to maintain, and if something goes wrong, you can have a big bill. But a lot of these rigs, at that time, you were buying for maybe anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, $4,000. So
really,
it's not like
that. Just seems crazy.
So,
I mean, now I think about it, I totally see where you come from, because they're purpose-built vehicles. So you can't really, once they come to their end of life of their operational duty, there's not really many other functions you can use a fire engine for. But that must have changed. Right. I mean, I know I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but you say it was inexpensive back then to get into. Have you ever experienced, I've heard quite a lot that fire engines are quite difficult to get hold of now because of this whole sort of Trojan horse analogy. Have you heard anything about that? Does that make sense?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I know when you talk about the Trojan horse analogy, I know exactly what you're referring to, but I don't think it's any more difficult now than it was back then. Okay. I mean, echoing what you said, they're purpose-built. They have a service life. And then when standards or technology changes, and especially during the era of the rigs that we cover, in a lot of cases, they went from cab to having to be closed cab and no more riding on the sailboard. So really, when it comes to the intrinsic value of the piece, in a lot of cases, it's just a scrap metal because they really don't have functional purpose anymore. Now, when it comes to, and it depends on the collector and it depends on the piece, right? If you've got a piece that served the FDNY that has pedigree attached to 9/11, I mean, obviously that's going to just heighten demand. So what otherwise would have been a pedestrian piece, all of a sudden, because it was attached to a significant event or served with a big department, obviously the price curve can change a little bit.
Yeah. Not all sort of collectors of these items are sort of born equally, if you will. And what I mean by that is, what is the world of fire operational vehicles or fire service trucks collectors? Because this is a whole subsector that I'm only just sort of discovering. There's some incredible people with some real passion in some of the vehicles. And when did you first, other than obviously your dad's integration with it, you could have gone your own path, but you decided to double down and have your own passion with it?
Oh, Pete, yeah. And you're exactly right. Like, I grew up going to events with my dad, like a lot of kids grow up going fishing with their dad, right? Like in the summertime, we would go to, we'd go to certain events, like there were the 5 or 10 events we'd go to every summer, and that was our time to go. And then as a teenager, and especially teenager, I was a hockey player. I kind of grew out of it and found partying and girls and all the other things. And in my mid to late 20s, my nephew actually was a catalyst in my getting back into it. And I took him to the same events I went to as a kid with my brother-in-law. we had some fantastic memories, and just the community really drew me. I mean, you talk about the different collectors, and my friend Bill, he's kind of said it the most eloquent way. There's so much passion for the rigs and for the meaning behind them, and the fact that they were tokens of pride for the communities they serve. Yeah. And when these collectors get them, there's some people that scratch and claw to stay in the hobby because they just have to scratch and claw to be in the hobby. There are other people that they can't spend their own interest in the hobby, but when we're all together, you wouldn't know one from the other. It's a very sincere group, just wonderfully magnificent people in so many cases. And you're right, the passion burns deep. And if you want to do a compare and contrast, and I'm going to use a wide brush here, but growing up, you'd go to car shows, and it's not uncommon for a car collector to maybe have one or two cars that are his or her pride and joy. But they won't take that car out if it's too sunny because they don't want the leather to crack in the seats. They won't take it out if it's rainy. And if you're at a car show, if you go to a car show, it's not uncommon to see a lot of these owners just, park themselves in a lawn chair beside their car, and they're proud to answer any question, but they want you to make sure if you're taking a picture, you take it on the right angle and whatnot. You go to a fire truck event, you go to a muster, these guys cut loose. It doesn't matter if it's sunny or rainy, and they're all about having a good time and really sharing the experience with people of all ages. And I've never been in a fire truck freighter event without seeing somebody in a stroller and somebody with a walker, and they both have a smile.
That's it, isn't it? And I think there's something so unique about that even when we do community events in the UK, people, they don't just want to look at these things. They want to see, they want to touch them, they want to feel them. You know what I mean? They are such... because like you say, each position on a fire truck is where some individual has stood and fought on the proverbial front line to protect their community, and they stand for so much more than their metallic sort of existence, if you will. Now, when your dad went into his first ever truck, what was the first truck he got?
Oh, he got a Bickle Seagrave. It's an aerial, and I can send you a picture of it. It's still service original. He bought it sight unseen. It's got an 85-foot stick on it, mid-mount open cab, Bickle Seagrave. It's a 1950, maybe a 51. I think it's a 50, but still in the collection. And every time I walk by in the warehouse, and we're together, I kind of said, that's the rig right there that started this whole thing for us, and it's going to forever have a special place in our heart. Big V12 Lycoming engine with 24 plugs in it. It's just a big oxidal rig, and it's funny. My buddy Chris, he drives it sometimes in some events, and he just jokes how you start at a second gear and seconds up there and thirds down here and fourths over there somewhere, you hope. And if you find it right, you might find fifth if you get going long enough. So anyway, kind of
I love it. I think to myself these days, because when I was preparing and sort of doing some studying for our episode, obviously in and out of watch that I've been on station the last few days, and it got me thinking a lot about the pumps on the actual back of all of the rigs, because we've got a couple of recruit firefighters and a few probationers and stuff going through their own development. And when I say to people about firemanship, and I don't mean that in a sexist way, but the sort of intangible training that goes into understanding the mechanical advantage that the vehicle is trying to give water, effectively. It's trying to impart energy into water. We have these days a lot of smart vehicles, smart CAFs, computers, and all this sort of stuff that do a lot of the thinking for us. But when I first started, we were having, the water ring primers, the centrifugal pumps, the exhaust gas ejectors, and stuff like that. And we had to actually know something about it. And it wasn't until I was looking back through some of the documentation and some of the great stuff that you've sent me. When did you see, and maybe you'll know far better than I will, some of the big changes in the way that the vehicles actually imparted energy into water? So sort of the timeline, if you will, of how the pumps sort of came to where they are, I suppose.
Right. And, Pete, that's a layered question, and very fascinating question. And you can apply it to more than just water, because you can also apply it to the aerial devices. But when did I notice it? Let me put it this way. By nature, man is about progression.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we got this. How can we do it better? And I get that. But I'd also say that if you come and you look at it from a very objective, linear standpoint, you have a pendulum going towards progression, but it can also project beyond its kind of point of value in certain cases. Like when they were back doing the box hand pump, that's the best they had. And then all of a sudden you're going to do steam and you get pressure, and all of a sudden you can get 1,000 gallons a minute, and you don't need two teams of 24 guys busting their backs to provide. That was a big step, man. That's a huge step. And then you get into the 40s, 50s, 60s, where you start introducing, the pitot and being able to control the pump off the engine of the rig. You're spitting out, 1,000, 1,500 gallons a minute, unless you're got the super pumper system in New York, and then up with 9,000 gallons a minute. That to me is very significant. Now, companies and trying to be competitive, it's interesting because there have been some great designs along the way. And if you look at game changers, a model of rig that just blows me away is Dick Young's Crusader, which was introduced in the late 60s. Had, as for pumping platform, Pete, had some amazing advancements in design and ingenuity, and just how
I'm looking at that one now. That's the game changers I've got in front of me now. That's some of the biggest things there.
And to me, when you look at technology, I think the late 60s to the early 90s is, for my money, the sweet spot when it comes to either delivering water or an aerial device. You had the best. Last year, or maybe the year before, there's a show run about an hour away from where I live, and a lot of antiques were there, but in concert with the rigs, they had a brand new T-Rex aerial platform. This thing was like a transformer, Pete. I mean, it had the articulating, the operator no longer has to stand and use controls. He or she can sit in a nice chair and just do everything by remote. And then when it comes to putting it away, they just push a button and it packs itself up, and it's a tidy package again. That scares the hell of me in some cases, because if you think of all the technology and engineering that goes into that, you can be on a call and all of a sudden the computer decides, it doesn't like what's going on and just shuts down.
I've had that.
They have to wait for a technician.
And it's really worrying. And for people that have not been in the job, I mean, I've only been in the job for 13 years, but people that have not even been in 2 or 3 years, they don't have, I mean, we actually do mechanical understanding or mechanical reasoning exams now in certain brigades, because I find that's one of the biggest things, that people don't understand what the vehicle is actually doing. They don't understand the mechanics of what is actually being achieved, because if you've got a rough understanding of what's being achieved, then you work backwards from that and try and problem solve yourself. But if you just think water comes out the end and it comes out really fast, and you're like, yeah, I don't need to know that. Yeah, well, you do though. You really should, for your own professional development. But also, when there's a problem and there's a fire getting out of control and you've had a pump failure, you need to know where to go to, at least, you've got a professional obligation. But also, I'm like, God, aren't you interested? I'm having this conversation with you because I'm sincerely interested. I'm excited about it, and I worry that that's one of the things we're missing out the job a little bit at the minute.
Oh, and you're bang on, and that's what I said. I think the pendulum swung too far. Like in the day, you had a fire engineer, and that was your pump master. That was the guy who understood the physics, understood the mechanics. He wasn't going to push anybody over. Was going to deliver the right amount at the right pressure at the right time. Now the FDN line, God bless them, they're an amazing department. You look at their pump panels; they're all color coded, and they've tried to make things. And with all due respect, I'm using the term in a very general way, but idiot proof, right? And,
I know. I totally agree with you, and I will support you in saying that, because efficiency. I get it. They're like, oh no, you've got so much more stuff to be worrying about, and you shouldn't be bogged down with the inner mechanics of the working of that pump, because on certain crews, personnel is a little bit less. We used to ride 6 in the UK. Now sometimes we ride in 4, but it's the diminishment of skill sets that really just worries me. It really worries me.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if you've heard the one-liner joke. My clipboard says I don't need to know that, right? So it's just it's been a very interesting evolution how society has just gone to a shift where you don't need to know, you need to be able to source the information. So and that applies on so many levels. Like when I was a kid, you had to know your matrix for your multiplication timetable off the top of your head. It had to be second nature. Now kids don't need to know that. They just need to know how to get the answer. And it's just a hugely complex. When it comes to the engineering and companies in the ongoing effort to always be the best, I think the pendulum swung too far and over-engineering things, and sometimes simple is better. And there's somebody at a desk trying to keep themselves relevant by coming up with the next latest greatest thing, when what we had was okay, guys, and it's interesting. So, but anyway, it's that whole thing's a machine bigger than beyond me. But
no, I agree with you, and it sounds like sometimes we're trying to reinvent the wheel in certain aspects, but I believe we've taken our eye off the ball with, and this is the very existence of the podcast, I suppose, in the teamwork analogy of it, and the sort of moral, teamwork basically that you see in the fire service. And where I see big holes in what we do now is, watch culture, pride in the job, and that sort of stuff. And if you don't allow yourself to get what some people would say bogged down in the minutiae of understanding the fire department or the fire service, then you can very quickly lose all of the things that are very precious to it. You've got to want to know. You've got to want to know these small aspects of where did this come from? What was the origin of it? Why is it important? If you don't understand the why behind it, then it's hard to sustain a passion for it, I suppose.
Well, and the evolution and kind of psyche of the candidate has really shifted. When, you and I are around the same age, I think we're kind of the last generation of the kind of purebred people generation that really got into a job because they loved it, right? If you look at firefighters, responders as a whole, pilots, teachers, the generation of people, I want to be a teacher because I love teaching, or I want to be a firefighter because I love fighting fire, or, I'm second or third generation, is declining. And you're seeing more and more candidates get in because it's a good, look at this and the benefits I get, and I get a stretch of days off. And it's just unfortunate because that culture and that kind of brotherhood, and don't get me wrong, because it's still there, but it's definitely different. And especially the elders in the fire truck community, the elders who are collectors and, the guys who are 10, 15, 20 years older than me, they really have noticed a really significant shift.
But I feel like it's that passion that's actually, because it's the whole chicken and egg scenario, which one comes first. These people have achieved great things, yourself in the company that you've built, and also even the podcast to a certain extent, I suppose. People, if we use that analogy and we said, hey, I want to have a podcast that's listened to in over 50 countries and is all this, and the other, but I need to find something that people are going to listen to. If they looked at the same thing as what you're doing and then said, I want to build a magazine or have a great charitable organization that does all these great things, but I need to find something I'm passionate about. If you try and do that, it will never work. When you first started it started with the passion. There was no end game. There was no, oh God, I hope we can turn this into something one day. And it's the same, the same with the podcast and the same with so many things. It has to start with a passion and a curiosity rather than looking at, like you said, the metrics of what's the income like, what's the pension like. Hang on a minute. Do you even like it? Are you even interested in it? Do you know what I mean? Because it's not going to be sustainable if you don't have, because you're always going to have the bad days. You're always going to have, like you'll have had it. Oh yeah, it's all well and good saying you've got X number of trucks and all that sort of stuff, but you're still going to get the old donkey when the engine drops out and someone damages something. Or it's not all roses. Do you know what I mean? The same with me. You have the number of trying to organize a podcast and people don't show up, or hours and hours of editing audio late into the night. Do you know what I mean? You're always going to have those days, and you've got to. The only thing that's going to get you through those things is the passion.
No, you're right. Yeah, and you're bang on. And if you look at the magazine, it's an interesting case study for everything you just suggested, because I was a subscriber, and I was just like anybody else who sent in their $30-$40 a year and subscribed. Now the editor came and did a story on our truck, and he and I became friends. And then he called me one day and he said, "Did you get your issue 11?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you better frame it. It's going to be a collector's item." So why is that? He said, "They're shutting us down." And just as a subscriber, I didn't want to see it go away. I really liked the magazine. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how close are you to breaking even?" He said, "Oh, we're close." And we ended up buying the title for $1. Now, it was the most expensive dollar I ever spent, because despite his best. And you know what? We took it over kind of on a whim. And the first couple of years, it was pretty tough sledding. And even now, it's like nobody's lighting their cigars with $100 bills at Vintage Fire Truck. It's not a money maker.
No,
we started off to break even, and we could make more money if we made an inferior product. But as far as I'm concerned, what we create reflects our sincerity and our passion for the community and the hobby. So I don't want to use cheaper paper. I'd rather maintain a standard.
No, and I totally agree with that, because these wouldn't be. I say Lily picks them up and she'll take them around the house and all this sort of stuff, but she knows they always come back in the study because she feels it, and she feels it's not just a crappy newspaper, it's not a piece of magazine, it's not whatever. It's really, not to get too bogged down into it, but it's really thick, heavy duty stuff, and that she can't ruin it either, and she looks after it. And it's one of those things, if you put your effort into something, people see that and they look after it and respect it.
When we talk in terms of the magazine, I consider it an important instrument of recording this information so it doesn't get lost. And we take that very seriously. So I consider my role to be a conduit to try and flush out and funnel and make sure, these stories and technologies and these evolutions don't get lost in the mix, because it's too valuable to let it get lost.
Absolutely agree, mate. And that, I echo that entirely in audible form, that if we don't capture these incredible individuals, yourself included, and document the journey that was gone, because somebody will pick this up. I don't know. I mean, my daughter picks this up. She's not of the age that she fully understands the work and stuff that's gone into this. But these things will stand the test of time, and they'll live in people's homes and hopefully inspire future generations of firefighters. I want to take us back to we got talking about this 1912 centrifugal pump when it first transitioned into that. Tell us in and around the origin of this, and we spoke about game changers and how this first came about.
Well, like it says in the article, and echoing what we were saying earlier, it really came down to wanting to build a better mousetrap. How do we deliver water in a higher capacity in the most efficient way? And if you look at the package with the platform that it's on there on page 14, not a very big unit, right? These were pumps that were the next step forward. It even says U.S. fire apparatus manufacturers relied on proven, tried and true pump technology carried over from steam engineer, and namely the rotary gear and reciprocating piston pumps. LaFrance used the rotary gear pumps on its famed Metropolitan steam fire engine, while the rival Aaron's builders of the popular Continental steamer adopted the piston-type pump. So you're in the early 1910s, you're post-industrial revolution. They were trying to migrate from the steam because. And Pete, have you ever had the opportunity to see a steam engine in action in real life?
Yes, a couple of times in the UK. We have steam fairs and stuff that I've been to, and they are quite a sight to be seen in themselves.
I think you and I would be kind by saying they require a lot of work. They're dirty.
Oh God,
they're dangerous. They things can go bad quickly. And when it's all they had, it's all they had. And then when you look at the centrifugal pump, it's just really, as far as I'm concerned, and Walt could probably expand upon it, but it's the situation where they're like, how do we get this big package, this big pump, steam pump performance out of something that is smaller, that can fit on a chassis of a truck and deliver the same results and do it safe? I'm sure they're like anything else. There were several different concepts and designs, but the centrifugal was the winner. They ran with that for a long time. For a long, long time, delivered a lot of water, saved a lot of lives, and it was a great piece of engineering. But I think when it comes down to the concept of remotely delivering water, the centrifugal package was safer, smaller, required less manpower, and checked a lot of boxes for a big step forward in water delivery, for sure.
Absolutely love it. It was really, really interesting for me to read its origins, because it's something I use every day, and I'd never really quite ignorantly taken the time to understand its origins. I was more in the depths of how it works and why it works, but it was really interesting for me. When we look at these aerial ladder platforms, when did they first start coming about? Because I'm looking back into some of the sort of turntable ladders. What sort of models have you guys got over there, and when did you first start seeing them coming out?
And I'd have to crack the book open again, but I think it was 1918 when the spring-loaded aerial. In around 1920, they really started saying we need to get up high, and we need to be able to do that from a platform we trust. And before then, and I'm sure we can find pictures of it, but there were horse and man-powered wagons that would just take a stick, maybe a 35, 40-foot stick on a stretch, and they'd have 8 or 10 guys, mount it in place. And again, it's not to sound like a broken record player, but how do we do this better? Well, we make a truck, and then, what started out as these really big, powerful springs that, if you ever see those go up, they just, it's a pretty quick action. And
I saw a video of somebody had one, and they sort of re-engineered it or whatever. It does go up quite violently. I'm looking back now. Yeah, it's 1868, and then it was Daniel D. Hayes, San Francisco repair shop guy, first brought the spring-raised aerial ladder out in 1902. By the looks of it, had its full 360-degree rotation. And it must have been an incredible sight to see for the first people out there using it, and it's probably quite scary, to be honest.
Well, I'm sure it was terrifying to a certain extent, because you definitely wouldn't want to be on the end of that when they let it go. That was brilliant. There are a couple collectors in the area who are good friends, and one of them has a 1930 Seagrave tiller, serves Syracuse, New York. It's got the spring load on it. We've seen it go up, and it's something to watch. But you look at all that contained energy that's in those springs. Again, it can present a danger.
Absolutely, it's a hazard in itself.
Our other friend, I want to say it's a 22, 3, 4, 5 American LaFrance. It's a straight chassis tiller. that's just an experience all unto its own. But it's got the same spring-loaded mechanism, and you crank the turntable and whatnot. What I find fascinating is that it doesn't matter the generation; boys will be boys. And there's a plaque that says, this is for fire use only, no circus stunts. Don't take it to your kid's birthday party and just try and impress people, because this is a really important piece of equipment that can be dangerous if not used properly. But they actually have a disclaimer on the ladder saying not to be used for circus stunts.
Really?
Official fire use only. Yeah. So you end up tell the boys to behave themselves and just focus on what they needed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking as well because I see when we started to move more towards a safer ability, if you will, it came in sort of the 1958 the elevation platform, which I think came off the original idea of the cherry pickers that they saw used in the parks and stuff like that. That's a hell of a good looking. It was the Chicago Fire Department came out with their first one.
Yeah, they sure did. So they were the catalyst in that whole movement. And man, you've seen a lot of them out there. And Dick Young tells a story about how he had the snorkel rights for New York and kind of the Eastern Seaboard. Dick Young was a proprietor of Young Fire Equipment, and Dick, God bless him, 90 years old, going to be 91 this year, and still sharp as a whip. And the stories he can tell, Pete, would blow your mind. But he engineered and did a lot of designing for fire equipment, fire apparatus platforms. Got the snorkel rights. He tells a story, and it best come from him, but it was either Syracuse or Rochester, New York. I think he was going to do a demonstration, and the chief of the department did not want to change from a traditional stick. He just wanted the traditional aerial platform, and Dick wanted to go and show what the articulating boom could do by comparison. So they decided at the Rescue and Fire Training Services Academy that they would do a test, and they'd have the department bring up their existing aerial, and they would go and pluck 6 people from a building, and then they would have the aerial, the platform do the same thing, and they'd see how it went. And it took a team of 4 guys to pull up with the aerial, and I want to say it took them over 22 minutes to pluck 6 people. And Dick went up with the snorkel and by himself had it done in under 4.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty remarkable. Just put that into just real context. He had 25% the manpower and did it in 20% of the time.
Plus a far smaller footprint, isn't it? They require a far smaller footprint to operate in as well, so they're much more agile vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. They're a lot more agile, a lot more. They're just the nature of the engineering, a lot more dexterity, and you can kind of thread a needle with it. Comparatively speaking.
I'm looking in now at the 1965 diesel engine when the diesel started coming through in their biggest fashion, if you will. What was the biggest difference there? Because I see the fact they went to the 6-cylinder engine was made more of a conventional use, more of a regular thing that they put into a lot of the vehicles.
Yeah, the diesel thing to me is, I've actually never had a conversation with it because I've only kind of made mental notes in my own mind's eye, but kind of interesting. The diesel engine itself was around during World War II. They had 671s powering the troop carriers to storm the beaches of Normandy.
Yeah.
It took 25 years for it to get adopted in the fire service. It'd make you wonder why, right? Like transportation companies, bus companies were adopting diesel and running up and down the road with them, but just fire service really didn't adopt it until probably the mid 60s. And obviously a game changer. I mean, you've got
It seems so strange that it took them so long to do it, though. Like you say, I don't quite follow what the thought process was there.
And I have no answer for you, other than some things take longer to adapt. Above and beyond that, a lot of chiefs of fire departments are deep in tradition, and they just don't like the change, right?
Scared to change.
From a sensory standpoint, diesel is louder. It's smellier. It's more smelly, I think would be the Queen's English. It's more offensive as far as the sensory experience. But as soon as those engines started rolling out within 10 years, they'd been adopted by pretty much everybody. Obviously, they go through to today. So, more power, easier to maintain, can't kill it. They say the more you hate a diesel, you drive it like you hate it, and that's what the engine wants. So,
I've never heard that one before.
Obviously, just drive it like you hate it. No, I don't I don't push our stuff like that, but some guys, they just like to just, line it right up.
So I see some really, really incredible vehicles that we've obviously got documented there. What are some of the most favorite ones that you guys have got?
Yeah, we've got, and I don't want to give you the coward's answer. It's like choosing the kids. I mean, obviously we bought them because we like them.
The kids or the vehicles?
But the vehicles are like, it's like choosing. I'll tell you what, we've got a few, and we've got a couple really nice pieces. I enjoy driving anything. I'll drive a golf cart as long as I get to play with it, right? So to me, it doesn't matter. I just want to be involved. When it comes to what tickles my fancy, it could be one of the two things. I like trucks that have a pedigree that attaches it to a certain event. We talked about 9/11 earlier. There's a big Detroit riot here. We've got a couple pieces that responded to that on mutual aid, and just to think that they were there during such a remarkable time in history is something that I put great value on. And neither of these trucks are stunners. Like, you'd walk by them in the garage and, well, maybe not you, but the average person would walk by and probably just shrug their shoulders and on to the next, because there's some more visually captivating pieces, perhaps. But, I care about where these trucks serve. There are some designs that I think are just beautiful and timeless. American LaFrance, I think, had some of the prettiest looking engines, but then you look at a like Mac, you just get into a Mac truck and you are in a truck. You just feel like surge of testosterone, and you can take on anybody at any time. So yeah, it just depends. And when I go to events, I'll tell you what, I enjoy driving, which is kind of interesting to say, because these things are not designed for comfort, and they're often persnickety. And sometimes, I don't know if you've seen the movie Christine, but you feel like you're in Christine, because it will do something sometimes, and it'll do what it wants other times. But seeing other people drive, I like seeing the emotion, and I can only see the world through my lens. And I don't like driving the prettiest truck, because I'd like to see it work. And if you're behind the windshield, you only get to see out the front hood.
So what have been some of the greatest events that you attend? Because I know COVID has sort of blown a big hole in some of it, but you said about some of the events you've gone with Firefest, and tell us more about that, because that's a huge, huge event that gives a lot of people a great sense of fulfillment when they're able to attend it. But I suppose the last year or so, they've not been able to.
Yeah, no, we were shut down last year. I don't think anything rolled last year, which is a shame. But we'll get through this, and we'll persevere. We'll get by this one way or another. But in the meantime, we just gotta take it for what it is. But pre-COVID, we're fortunate that I'm in Canada, but we're very close to the United States. We got some great friends the other side of the border. So within probably about a 3, 4, 5 hour radius, driving in a rig, there are probably 40 events a year that we can go to. And obviously with our involvement with the magazine, we're fired and eager to get to events, basically to wave our flag as well, right? So that's that. As it pertains to Firefest, I'll tell you what, Pete, Firefest happened again because my nephew got me back in the hobby. My brother-in-law and I started going to events and really enjoyed the social benefit of going to these places with these trucks and having a few drinks and a few laughs and going on. But what started out is Keith and I taking Kyle to the same events I went to as a kid, morphed into Firefest, and kind of, if you go to an event, and I went to a lot of these events when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I go back in my late 20s, there's a lot of the same people that really were in the same spot and doing the same thing, right? And, well, let's shake it up a bit, because there were some very established events that wasn't a new one. So we just said, well, what can we do? What can we do that's a little bit different? And a lot of the events, there are two types of events. There's one for the truck. The truck owner event, it doesn't matter where you park. As long as you got a water source, you can park your trucks and, do a little bit of a cookout or get some snacks and maybe have a drink or two and have some fun. And then there are kind of commercial, kind of touristy events where it's a little bit more pop and stance when it comes to special guests or making it a draw. Absolutely. And that's what Firefest has. So when we went to the city, we said we wanted to do a fire truck show. And they said, that's neat. Like, what can you do to draw people downtown? We want to do that. So then, we would challenge ourselves. It wasn't just, coming and parking. It was like we'd have a schedule of events with demonstrations and special guests and different features. So, Firefest, the first year we ran it was 2012. And we were told we'd be lucky if we got 15 or 20 trucks. And I think we had 42 or 43. We were told we'd be lucky if we had 500 people. I think we had closer to 5,000.
Jesus. That's
and then,
amazing.
kind of crescendoed through to 2019. Last year we had it, and we had, including in service, I want to say we had 72 old vintage trucks, and then another 20 or so in service that were here, there, and everywhere. So we're pushing 100 vehicles. And,
that's incredible.
And the way the city, and I don't count people, but the way the city told us, they said, you know what, you averaged between 5,000 and 6,000 people downtown at a time, and that turned over probably 3 times. So you're looking at upwards of 18,000, 20,000 people throughout the day. And there's a gentleman set up a camera, do a shoot of the parade, and I think it's got over 1.5 million views now. So there's definitely an audience, and there's definitely a passion. Like I say, I've never been in a fire truck and seen anybody with a frown on it. It's
something
always
so unique that brings to it. But it must be becoming, when you talk about doing it at such a large scale like that, it must rapidly become quite a huge time-consuming thing. How do you bear the load of that in everything else that you do? And does the community step up? Is it a real strong community? Because people forget how difficult it is for organizers and how much you really have to put into it.
I'll tell you what, when it got canceled last year, it's incredible the time that it frees up, and it allows you to kind of probably that's it. As I'd say, over the course of the year, probably 300, 350 hours would go into planning and executing the event for one day. And you know what? Like I'll tell you, as far as the event's concerned, it would be easy to burn yourself out if you allowed it to do that. And there were times I was like, holy cow, this is something, but we always found a way to do it. But last year was a very sobering experience in the sense that, people lost a day, and I'd be in the supermarket or out and about, and people, is Firefest happening this year? Well, I don't know. I mean, I hope so. If they tell us we can play, we've got some ideas, but people one day, but I gained 300 hours. So, got to do some other things that were probably more healthy to contribute to my lifestyle and my work, and investing all that time for the community. But and not that I mind doing it, but it's a big deal. Like
it's huge. It's really huge.
A lot goes into it.
So for people who are listening in who have always had the ambition to get more involved with that community of collectors and stuff like that, what's the best way for people to reach out and sort of get that support? Because obviously, I don't know how many people will be aware of the vintage fire truck equipment, but they can access this stuff through the magazine, through the online. What's the best way for people to get in contact?
I'll tell you what, Pete, I look forward to learning more about how the hobby operates on your side. And I look forward to the day where we get to meet. And I'd love to think that could happen in the next year or two. So I can't speak with any real expertise over your place, but in North America, like we said earlier, it starts with a passion. And if you want to get involved in the hobby, there are a lot of ways you can do it. You don't necessarily have to own a rig. I mean, you can just come to events. You can. There are different. There's a big club called Spampa. They're a members only group, but you become a member and you get a card, and they have meetings, they host events, and there are a lot of fantastic people that work with Spampa. That would be something people would consider the easiest way to get in. If you want to be in the hobby, just like a Facebook page. I mean, social media has been so instrumental in augmenting awareness and introducing things to people that they never even crossed their mind they might be interested in. So what I would if I was going to make one plea to people, and especially younger folks, there's more to life than sitting behind a computer screen. Like, I know you and I are doing it right now, but we both have something beautiful to look at.
I would.
But when you look at these kids.
But I would also, I would far, given the choice, I would far prefer to be doing this in person with all of our guests. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing we're losing. We're losing that human connection.
No, and I hear you. But to me, there's such a sensory experience about getting in a vehicle, and especially a bigger old vehicle, that if it could tell stories, could keep you up all night. Yeah. And feeling it come to life, selling the vinyl and the oil and fuel, and you know what, having to turn a steering wheel that doesn't have power assist, and having to crank down a window if it is advanced enough to have crank down. But I just hope the younger generation, and I hope society gives more attention to celebrating our past, because we're only where we are because of those who came before us. And there are times where I kind of shriek a bit, because I think that we've been cultivated and brought to believe that it needs to be fast-paced and it needs to be quicker and better and more engineering. And really, guys, it's to a certain extent, you're right, but you don't want to forget the simple things, because there's a lot of benefit and there's a lot of value in really celebrating these vehicles and the history they represent.
And it's the character building aspect of it as well. When I hear you talking there, the process and the discipline that goes into learning these vehicles and appreciating where you've come from gives you a much greater moral grounding in the roots of the fire department and the fire service and that emergency services community as a whole.
Well, and see, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what it's like over in the UK, but my heart just breaks for these volunteer firefighters and these firefighters that want to volunteer, especially in the United States, because government regulators are crushing their ability to even become firefighters because they make them train to the nth degree. And I get it. People need to be trained, but they made it cost prohibitive for these volleys who have to pay out of their own pocket to get training and pay out of their own pocket to get equipment. And then they're not getting paid on the flip side. Like who gets out of bed for that, right? And you're expecting these people to go and fight fire. And it's a tragic reality when government and bureaucrats and people driving the machine just make it so difficult for these people to become firefighters. It's a problem. I don't know how, it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve because when it comes to delivering service, to put a coin on it, they're pricing themselves out of the market. There are a lot of good people out there that want to serve the communities that just can't.
Yeah, I know. And when so much of it is expected to come from the individual at their own cost. I mean, in the UK, we're still very lucky that we get all of our training provided for us. But I know speaking to firefighters in America, but also in Canada, and they can spend upwards of $9,000, getting themselves trained before they're even allowed to apply. They have to accumulate a lot of this specialist training. And it's a huge personal investment, which, it comes at a great cost to other sacrifices in their own life and their families as well.
Sure does. To do what? To serve their community and protect others. People they don't even know.
How dare
I
they?
just think if government and bureaucrats would really come back to center and maybe work with these people and support them in ways that they're not doing right now.
And in terms of return on investment, like you say, the amount you get from somebody like that, from somebody in the whole emergency services community, frontline responders as a whole, not just firefighters, you get more than you think you do because they're ultimately, high level problem solvers. They have an interest in helping all aspects of their community.
Absolutely.
Brent, I really appreciate you spending your time today, mate. I'm going to go and look through the rest of this with my daughter. For people that are interested in getting hold of the magazines, I know we're going to have a few chats in the future. What's the best way for people to get hold of the magazine and for them to reach out to yourself?
Oh, sure, yeah. No, absolutely. We'd love to expand our audience. Online, vintagefiretruck.com, or we've got the acronym of VFT Meg, so Victor Fox Tango Meg.com. We're thrilled. When we took the title over, at the end of the day, there were less than 900 subscribers back in 2017 and 2 countries. And now we're up pushing past 2,500 subscribers in 13 countries. We've had some nice growth. And I'll tell you what, the more people that have it in their hands, it just seems like they're telling their friends and it's growing. So, yeah. VFTmag.com or vintagefiretruck.com and Facebook. And we're a small little company, but anybody who needs to get a message to me, either through email or through Facebook, one way or another, it should find its way.
It's an incredible brand, mate. I love the look of it. We'll be sharing all of that. It will be in the notes for the podcast. So I'm guarantee when I go down and speak to the on-call guys, I know they'll be interested in seeing this.
Have you heard the analogy of the 2 firefighters and the 2 steel balls?
No.
Okay, so a friend of mine works for the FDNY. He works in the shop. And Pete, you got to talk to one of those guys because the machine they have keeping their apparatus on the road, their shops, unbelievable.
Really?
But the story he tells me, he goes, it's always the same. He goes, 2 firefighters and 2 steel balls. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you can put 2 firefighters and 2 big steel balls the size of a beach ball in a room that only has 1 door and no windows. And you can come back an hour later. 1 ball's missing, the other one's broken, and nobody knows what happened.
That is exactly the case. It's always the case. Every time we come on handover for station and stuff like that, something has always happened, and nobody can say anything about it. I always say when we get delivered new equipment, we say, "Has it been tested?" People say, "Yeah," and we go, "Well, it's going to get tested. It's not been tested by a firefighter. We will test something until it breaks. We will do everything it's not designed to do, and then a few pieces more. And when it breaks, nobody will know anything about it."
Right on.
Love it, brother. We'll send my love to the family, and I sincerely look forward to speaking to you again real soon, my friend.
Yeah, see, whatever we can do for you from over here, just let us know, and it was an absolute pleasure to have this time with you today.
You too, brother. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.
You gotta go. Okay.
Bye. Well, there we have it, everyone. That was my chat with Brent. Such an interesting guy. Really, really enjoyed speaking on and off the podcast about some of the great work that vintage fire truck equipment do. And this guy can talk forever about the rigs and the different designs and just the upholstery, the materials, the technology. And they've got such an amazing community of people with such a wealth and depth of knowledge about how this equipment came about, some of the successes, some of the failures in the industry. Now, don't forget, if you want to find out a bit more about Brent and the team, you can head over to vintagefiretruckmagazine.com. Now, I'll be totally honest with you guys, I am an absolute geek when it comes to fire trucks. I love the culture that is in some of these incredible machines. It is really great to see a community like this still going hard with the passion that they have for the fire service, for the equipment, for the trucks, for everything that makes that rich heritage of fire service culture exactly what it is and exactly what got me into it. You have got to head over to Vintage Fire Truck Equipment and check out some of the incredible stuff these guys are doing. If you're the sort of person that loves to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of how these things are created, I'd especially suggest you start with their Game Changers edition in December of last year. That is an absolutely fascinating read. Now, this really goes into some detail. In that Game Changers edition, they go into all of the dawn of the steam engine to the pre-computer age, celebrating all the eras where apparatus was skillfully designed and engineered to help the firefighter in the ways that was previously unheard of. Ultimately, we're talking about boys and their toys. And I don't mean that it's only the boys that are interested in it. Some of these pieces of equipment are just fascinating, guys. You've got to head over there and check it out. A huge thanks to Brent for coming on the show, and a huge thanks once again to yourself for taking time out of your busy day to spend time right here with us on the Firefighters Podcast. I hope if that tickled your pickle, you're going to head over to Vintage Fire Truck Equipment, and I sincerely look forward to seeing you all back here real soon on the Firefighters Podcast.